All right, let's get right into it. First off, thanks for making time for this, Henry. I know you're busy. I think the best way to start is for you to briefly introduce yourself and let us know a bit about the man behind Art for Anarchists. After that, I've got a list of questions, 10 or so, and we'll take it from there. Does that sound okay?
Sounds great. Thanks
Awesome.
for working with me here.
No worries.
Sure. So the man behind Art for Anarchists. I'd like to say the attitude or the idea behind Art for Anarchists, and that the whole concept of it being somewhat anonymous is a nod to the whole zeitgeist of blockchain and all the way back historically to the cypherpunks and the importance of anonymity as it relates to personal privacy, which is a freedom and a right. That is just something I want to say. But as an artist, I've been working as an analog artist. Analog I say as in not digital, painting and sculpture, two-dimensional, three-dimensional, conceptual, installation for about 20 years. It goes back to a need for healing, a healing process. Art for me, I got into art. This is hard for me a little bit, and I'll get through it though. I got into art as a direct result of a series of traumas that I couldn't cope with, that led to a pretty severe addiction to drugs and a downward spiral in my early 30s that ended me in the hospital, in inpatient rehab. And, it took me a long time to get through it. And while I was in the hospital, a doctor had said to me, you have to find ways of looking at these dark subject matters and concerns that you have outside of yourself. And that just triggered this idea that I could look outside of myself. And so I started to imagine how. And the issues I had, being a post-traumatic disorder sufferer, there's a lot of ideation on my own mortality and death and intrusive thoughts. I know this is dark, but we'll dig our way out into the light here soon. Mm-hmm. And so when I got out of the hospital, I started to immediately, I had this inclination to look at atrophy and decay and disorder and, nature's taking back kind of, what feels grim about the, things falling apart, society falling apart. It was much of what my obsessive concerns are, is how society's falling apart. I'm a father of many children, and, I was then, and, so I started photographing dilapidated buildings, abandoned buildings, zombie houses, breaking into, just old skeletal structures, and photographing them in such a way that meant to me kind of psychic profile. So the first real series that I would say I ever developed was something I called bipolar matrix. And it was 100 photographs taken over the course of about 6 months in these abandoned spaces that, for me, created a complex sort of statement on mental health and what it means to be trapped in one's own interpersonal space if it's not healthy. And that really solidified in me of the notion that I could see outside of myself. I could project outside of myself. I could work outside of myself through all of these subject matters that I felt were afflicting myself and also society in general. From there, shortly in the same time frame, we won't worry too much about time frames, but in this same time frame, my brother, who has always been a great inspiration for me as far as pushing me, as he saw, sort of a spark of talent back then, he called me one day and said, I need you to see this. And there were 4x8 sheets of cold pressed steel. and steel comes from the mill with a mill scale. And they were going to use these sheets of metal to build out a boat dock. So they were stripping the mill scale off the metal sheets with hydrochloric acid. And this acid and many different types of acid, they're all accelerators in the oxidation process on metal. And by that, I mean, it accelerates and really impregnates the field of, why I say the field is like when you look at a piece of metal, it's like looking at a canvas, right? You have the field of view. And in that field, the oxidation process was out of control. It was just unbelievable. And what I saw in that metal was, the 20th century post World War II Abex, school of the art. I mean, there was Clifford Still and Jackson Pollock and William de Kooning. I mean, I could see all of, just semblances of their art everywhere in the metal. So I photographed the metal and I took it home, worked on it in Photoshop just to sort of pull out what I saw and get to the point where it looked on the computer the way it looked on the metal. And I realized in that moment that there was something really special about working on metal. And so I started developing processes, where I was buying metal sheets and putting them into my studio, throwing on a gas mask and working out with these acids, which led to, bringing in grinders and blow torches and, finally traditional paint mediums. And, but the interesting thing about it was that when the work was ready, perfect, beautiful, like if I could hang this 100-pound piece of metal on the wall at the moment of its aesthetic perfection, it would cease and desist, like the oxidation turned to black. So I had to document I had to photograph these metal plates, this work that I wanted to show the world. The only way I could is by photographing it. And then the art object per se was just a photo document of an art process. And so that's where it all began.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Jeez.
If you have any questions further about that.
Yeah, I have a couple. So like when you're talking about the acid, I imagine like, if something rusts, it's just going to be red. But in your work, you have so many different colors. You were adding different types of acid or you have some chemical, like chemistry background. How did you come up with so many colors?
No. So so the oxidation is really about texture. In the early works, I was fascinated with texture. I also had the sense that energy itself was the subject matter in those works, because the alchemical aesthetic is something that happens rapidly in a short period of time, and the transformation of the surface of the substrate, which I call metal a substrate, like canvases, that transformation is happening so fast. And, you literally can see it change, go through phases, and, you capture it. And it's almost like capturing a car driving past you at 60 miles an hour. So that I really started to identify the subject matter of my work as energy. And really there's a lot of chaos theory that I would apply to my thinking about the work, in that when you look at these fields, they, from a 10-foot perspective, let's say you're the viewer in a gallery and you're 10 feet away, they have the read of a painting, like an abstract painting. You really, you sense something is different, that perhaps paint wasn't the only thing used, but it does read like an abstract painting from 10 feet. But then you have this sort of intriguing other read, which is that because it's a photo rendering, from that 10-foot view, you can walk up to the picture and it's as clear from 1 foot away than it is from 10 feet away, which you cannot have that experience with an actual painting. Meaning that from the 10-foot view, you have the painting view. And from a 2-foot view, you now have, say, 10,000 paintings in front of you. Because from 10 feet away, the read is sort of maximal and real. Up close, all of a sudden, you're awash in this sort of like infinite, value system of details. Mm-hmm. And no matter where you look in the work, it's crisp and clear and as abstract. Sort of you have a micro and a macro view, and they sort of come together. And it's a bit of a mind trick. I mean, when you first have the experience of that, it doesn't go out of view. Like if I walk up to a Jackson Pollock at MoMA, say Autumn Rhythm, and from 10 feet away, it's just swirling. It's alive. It's gestating. You feel all the rhythms. Hence the title. You feel the rhythm in his gesturing as he painted it. But when you walk up to it, it completely collapses into sort of like globs of blurry paint, and it doesn't hold its greater truth as seen from a distance. And what happens is the greater truth multiplies when you look at a photo rendering of this sort of like energy at play. And so back to your question, the need for me to then to bring into the metal traditional mediums, paint in particular. I really enjoyed working with watercolor, because watercolor, you can work with opaque, or transparent. And then I realized that I could either let the watercolor dry if I wanted like transparency in the hue, where basically, because I'm shooting metal, the refractory of light as you're documenting the metal, if I allowed that paint to dry, it would just become this beautiful sort of glowing area. Or if I were to then burn that wet, so you think about watercolor, it's pigment in water, right? Mm-hmm. So that pigment is, it's not completely sort of emulsified in the water. So you can burn it, and then it becomes a textural element with color, and you're getting relief, because that pigment is going to burn and sort of like, just solidify on the surface as a kind of colored char. And again, because you're documenting it with a camera, that char becomes a relief texture. And so in the photo reel, you are able to bring out subtle variances in texture to the like absolute flat or transparent regions. And the whole color palette by design came from mostly bringing in watercolor. I did work with acrylics and oils to a certain extent, but then from there, grinders, heat. Grinders are fantastic for textural anomaly. And then again, I can't say it enough, because you're documenting a metal, the refractory of light changes so dramatically by the temperature of the light that you're shooting it, the conditions of shooting the metal. I could literally, out of a single metal plate, probably create 10 or 20 variations on a theme. And so that's where the color would come from.
There's a lot to digest there. So I understand there's metal sheets and there's chemical reactions using acid, but just now you said that you used watercolors and you were burning the metal as well, and then photographing. There's like a chemical reaction that I thought was kind of slow. Like I thought you were photographing a sunset, like it would be like a couple-hour process. But at one point there, you said it was actually quite quick, like photographing a car. But you've also got the pigment in the watercolors and the burning aspect. I can't imagine how it all comes together. Maybe we'll move on to one of your collections, the Token Metrics of the Soul. So that was, can you tell us a bit about that?
Sure. Substrates varied. Some were produced on copper, some were produced on cold pressed or hot pressed steel, some were produced on a carbide based metals. The origin of the token metrics stems from a project that got started in 2012. I am very interested in dialogue as the single most important tool we have at resolving all of the problems of the world. And I had this idea for an installation work that involved both two-dimensional works, which were the token metrics pieces that you see, and then dialogues that I would film with philosophers and spiritual leaders around the world. And in particular, I spent 6 weeks in Jerusalem in 2014. And as part of the process, I brought an edition of those 38 works with me. We had 38 interviews, and I actually arrived at the number of works based on the number of interviews. And so as I had a benefactor at the time, Richard Sands of Constellation Brands, who financed the project, had hired for me a filmmaker, a film company called Blue Sky Project out of New York City. Emmy award-winning documentary filmmaker was my sort of right-hand man on filming these dialogues. And I was partnered up also with a Buberian philosopher out of Manhattan College. And so all of this came together. The whole purpose of the trip to Jerusalem was, we actually started in Germany. We visited Dachau, and we met with some thinkers on and around the idea of dialogue in the peace process, in particular, how to avoid another Holocaust was sort of the subject matter of the German part of the trip. But in Jerusalem, it was really focused on spiritual leaders. And so all of this convened there. And unfortunately, we got caught up in what was the occupation of Gaza as a direct result of 3 teenagers being murdered by Hamas, which was a retaliation for a teenage boy named Muhammad Abu Qadir, who was abducted out of a neighborhood outside of Old City, Jerusalem, called Shafka, and he was burned alive by having gasoline poured down his throat and set ablaze. So very difficult time. It all accelerated while we were there. We had gotten through about 18 of our filmed dialogues with spiritual leaders, and everything started falling apart because of the conflict. And so it ultimately completely fell apart, and we were no longer able to film the dialogues. Everything was shutting down, and we ended up shifting gears through a contact that we made to meeting with and discussing what was happening on the ground there with the Palestinian family of Muhammad Abu Qadir. So that got that became a massive, like, transformative experience for me, and really changed my whole approach to art, from settling for the pursuit of aesthetics to needing to use the outlet to make a difference in the world and to attack, approach, and engage social justice work. So that series comes out of that experience. And because that whole project fell apart because of the conflict, I had been sitting on the collection for all these years. And I decided last year sometime that it was perfectly relevant as a meditation on the crypto technology, in particular, symbolically, the shape of the coin and the circle as a mark in the field of energy. I'd like to, when we get to starting to talk here about the crypto blockchain and NFTs, the whole movement, the revolution of crypto up to and including this NFT chapter of it, is on so many levels activating social justice work. It is liberating people all over the world. The unbanked are being banked, the uninsured are being helped. But yeah, so that's where this particular collection has finally come to roost here in meditations about how the crypto revolution and blockchain and NFT is going to change the world.
Okay. So I have some follow-up questions there. With regard to the NFTs, so you had the images digitally because that's how you captured them when the metal was changing, and now you're going to turn those into NFTs. Could you explain if that process is complicated at all, and what an NFT is, and why they're so popular now?
Yes, sure. Well, so why they're so popular is a layered question. And I think that the real reason why they're popular right now is sort of somewhat immature. I think there's a lot of, the majority of people that are coming to NFT are following, it's a sort of herd mentality. They're following the natural, migration here cycle from what was, let's wrap our mind around crypto, in blockchain 3, 4, 5 years ago, to now let's wrap our mind around this, infinitely more immaterial and interesting concept of the NFT, or non-fungible token. But before I get into all of what I have to say about this, to your question, no. So was I a digital artist? This is an interesting question. I always documented my original plates, whether I was working on metal or in anything other conceptual, to arrive at a photo document. I always document with a DSLR. In particular, I really like Nikon D800, meaning my work is captured and brought into Photoshop in a raw file, and then brought back to life to what you see on the metal itself, what the artist sees, right? The artist's vision has to be interpreted through the tech. Mm-hmm. And, the platform is Photoshop for me. I've been working with it for almost since the beginning. But that there isn't, in the original works, not works that I'm doing now, but in the original works, these older works, the collection in particular we're talking about, it's digital only to the extent that it had to be brought from the analog world into a digital world in order to arrive at the output format of a monoprint or a giclée, something museum grade for my collector base. Mm-hmm. Interestingly, the criticism of my two-dimensional analog art career, if you want to call it criticism, was that most critics look at what I'm doing as creating something that isn't true. Like, so it looks like a painting, but it's a photograph. Well, why aren't you hanging the original? Because the original can't be hung, because it no longer exists, because you can't control the process of oxidation. Or in everything that I've ever done, in my analog career was always by design, could only be rendered as an edition or a monoprint. And the word immaterial comes up a lot in reviews of my shows, grappling with the immaterial and that the original no longer exists. But then you have the quandary of what does original mean, right? If the artist's intention is to put this on the wall, then this is the original intention, right? That it, you're obsessed with what happened in the process to arrive at an original, you're not thinking about the original. But so the concept of the immaterial, which is extremely important to NFTs, in wrapping one's head around the idea of NFT and why they're important, valuable, transformative, revolutionary, etc. We're going to have to grapple with, the shift in what is value, and how do things acquire value, and what is valuable. So
yeah, I think it's hard for a lot of people. Like I think when Bitcoin first came out, everyone said, "Oh, that can't be worth anything because you can't put it in your hand." But now more and more people are seeing the value of Bitcoin. But this NFT trend, I think it's hard for a lot of people.
If I might sort of walk you through a sort of an art historical little journey to the NFT, I think that's a helpful thing to do. So, because the NFT market, it's non-fungible token. What are we doing? We're assigning metadata and minting a coin, and this coin contains a digital replica of an original art piece. The NFT itself, by design, that it's ledgered on the blockchain, immutable, and proof of ownership is solidified, makes the process of minting and selling an NFT, selling an original. It is the only way that it has ever been possible to take a digital, an image in the digital world and make it an original. That's a first most important point. People say, well, I can just copy that. I can copy and paste it. I can, screenshot it and share it. But you are not sharing the original. And by that, I mean, you're not opening whatever marketplace or platform that you're sharing it to. You're not opening that platform to the original intended dialogue between the artist and the viewer, because that person that clicks, shares, that's it. It's closed to the artist's intention. We're talking about a revolution, right? What people use the word revolution. So what is the revolution? The revolution is, it's anti-capitalist. It's anti-corporatocracy. It's about liberating the masses from, we could say, sort of dramatize, say, the tyranny of control mechanisms over how we live, how we succeed, how we make money. If you take the blockchain technology, NFTs specifically for artists, is eliminating the whole art world industry. The apparatus of the art world is just swept away. The whole process happens between the artist and the collector, or the artist and the viewer. And the artist is empowered to produce and sell his work without an art manager, a gallerist, an art dealer. The cost to the artist, who is, for the most part, artists of the world are, waiters and, accountants and garbage men and, whatever. I mean, these are lower and middle class people that are struggling to make ends meet to produce art. And to have a show on any level, I mean, like a real show in a real gallery, you're talking about the production of the prints. If you are like me, I would have to produce the print. I would have to frame the print. I would have to, if the work, you know, if I had a show in Paris, cost me $25,000 to put the show on, just to get the show there. And then you have to sign contracts where your gallery is going to take 60% of the sales, and your art manager has a percentage cut, and everything that doesn't sell. A lot of times their contracts are, they have, there could be a right built into the contract where they have the ability to buy the work at X price if it doesn't sell. I mean, these are things that artists deal with in the everyday world. And the NFT market just eliminates all that. Eliminates that. I mean, that's revolutionary. It is revolutionary. And so back to my point of if you are into art, and this is how NFT is going to be important to begin with. If you're into art, you are into the concept of the original, you're into the concept of artist rights, you're into the notion of this has value because you believe in the artist's vision, right? That you are accessing the dialogue that the artist starts. So an NFT, the problem that you're having is that NFT is roped into right now, really still largely in the crypto concept, right? The majority of people coming to NFT are coming to it as speculators. They aren't necessarily, art historical buffs, art collectors, artists themselves, but there's a market value. However much it's speculation right now, there's already value in the market. So people are playing on that, trying to get in, trying to make money. But the future of the NFT is going to become, as it matures, it's going to be made up and filled out with a kind of real intelligent body. You're going to have the world of art collectors, the art industry itself, the artists themselves, even the average crypto user is going to come around to a greater understanding of art, because this is a cultural revolution, right? And there's an aspect of the cultural revolution that's in crypto itself, in blockchain technology, but then there's a more erudite and academic and historical thing happening, a precedent happening, a change, a paradigm shift in the art world. And art drives culture, especially the slow change over time. That happens through art. So the value of the NFT, it begins with a respect for the creation, or I shouldn't say the creation, but the process by which a digital art can be original. And the only way it can be original is just come into play with the NFT, non-fungible token. It identifies it as an original. It legalizes it as an original. It's a smart contract, a legally binding contract.
Okay, I got it. A couple of people have asked me, so like, why can't an artist just mint the same piece on several different platforms? Or let's say they mint a one of one, or a set of 10, a year later, could they go back to the same platform and do another set? Or is it self-regulated like eBay? Like if you start, abusing the system, people will just lose interest? Or how does that work?
Well, it's going to work the same way as it does in the analog art world. And that is, as a photographer, or, let's say I work in Aquatint, produce prints, right? Green prints, regardless of what type of printing you're working with. You are going to say, I take a series of screen prints to gallery for a show. Those screen prints are editioned. Let's say it's a edition of 3, and there on the wall is the one of 3. And let's say one of 3 sells, then the 2 of 3 sells, and the 3 of 3 sells, and it's sold out, the edition.
Mm-hmm.
In that world, the responsibility is mine. And in the NFT world, the responsibility is mine. The integrity of the project, the art project of the artist, the integrity of the artist, and his ability to develop a career is based on, a long-standing tradition of honoring the edition. So the NFT takes it a step farther because truly it means one of one. Now it is everywhere. There's the mechanisms are there to produce an edition of 1,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
But again, this is a personal statement. I believe that a true NFT is a one of one. Once you get into the edition, which there's nothing wrong with having editions, but you're breaking the code of rarity. And so that code of rarity is what drives the art market and has always driven the art market. And it's why a painting is always going to be more valuable than a photograph or a screen print, because there is only one painting. That's where the NFT and the one of one becomes so important, because it's how the NFT gains respect. It's how the NFT artist will gain respect. If I say to a collector by my minting that it's a one of one, and that collector spends thousands of dollars on that NFT art, which is a completely respectable and rational thing to do if you believe in the art and you believe in the artist and you believe in the market. And then a year later, I produce another edition of that same NFT. I've destroyed my reputation with that collector. That collector could then destroy my reputation across, the whole all the platforms. They're all rooted in social media. So is there going to be fraud in this marketplace? Sure. It happens in every marketplace. But as with the traditional art world, the NFT market will be traditionalized. You're going to have to follow the sort of the silent code of ethics. It's important. So people who aren't in this for the real value and cultural significance of art and how it can participate in transformative growth of mankind, those people have nothing to lose. They're in it for the money. Mm-hmm. But somebody like myself, I'm in this to validate NFT as the next art form, as a conceptual movement of the art market itself. This is what, when I want to go back and run through a quick line of art history that steps up to this moment, this is not so much conceptual art, even though it does play out here. The idea of the NFT being a conceptual art right now, and it's in this contemporary moment, you can look at the NFT as a conceptual art, a class of its own. But it's the NFT marketplace is conceptualized. It's the actual market is being transformed in that way. It's conceptualized right now. And that's fascinating. It really has never happened before on this level. The art market has never changed like this so quickly. There's no precedent. This is a new precedent.
Yeah, the world's changing.
It really is.
Changing quick. Okay, that's good.
So let me just quickly go over this.
Yeah.
So, the idea of revolution, the Zeitgeist revolution in the whole blockchain space, where does this come from? I'd say, if we're going to stay in the mode of art here, you can go back to, like, say, an artist like Arthur Rimbaud. He was a poet.
Mm-hmm.
Arthur Rimbaud was really the first poet to lash out against the social and cultural elite and broke all the norms. And the spirit in Rimbaud's writing went on to inspire one of the great art movements of the 20th century. It was called Dada. And, Dada, it rose out of the proletariat's frustration with the bourgeois elite, and in particular with the elite institutions within the art complex of the day, telling a world of what is art, what can be art, what cannot be art, what is valuable, what is not valuable. And an artist by the name of Marcel Duchamp, who famously put a urinal and signed the name mutt on the urinal, and he put it into an art show in New York City in the 1930s. And that single moment in art history completely changed the future of art, and I would say is the seed of the NFT art revolution, because Dada said, no, you don't get to tell us what is art. What the artist intends to be art is art. And that idea was so radical at the time. It was preposterous that somebody could take a bicycle seat or a urinal and put that in a gallery. And so there you have the attitude that would eventually fuel the cypherpunks. And I'll explain that. But from there, there's the seed of the attitude of the NFT. And in this notion of the immaterial, that people are buying something that they can't hang on their wall, that how could that possibly have value? But you asked me before we got into this about what gives it value. Do you remember when we talked about that?
Yeah. And just from what you've been saying now, sorry if I get you off track, but I was thinking about, you go to a garage sale and there's this magnificent painting there, but it's not signed and we don't know who made it. That could never be sold for millions of dollars. And I think you said a couple of times today, a big part of art is supporting the artist. Is that why those kind of paintings would never sell for millions of dollars? Because if you don't know who the artist is, it's not art.
Well, no, I mean, so the traditional art market is driven by what's referred to as provenance.
Mm-hmm.
So the life story of a particular work is extremely important to its valuation. I mean, you're going to have, a critical apparatus is going to determine what are the most significant works of an artist's career, what are his or her masterpieces.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of valuation. But the idea that something would sell that was anonymous, it would have to have a proven, it would have to be proven. It would have to have proven pedigree in order for it to be sold at auction. I mean, anybody can sell anything to anyone, with or without a name.
Mm-hmm.
But for any work to succeed in the analog art world, it has to have a traceable lineage. And this is also where the blockchain comes in. And so built into the NFT revolution is an immutable life story of provenance, where who bought the work, who bought the NFT from me, who did that person sell the NFT to, the price at which it's sold for. So price development in the market is being documented and put on the blockchain. All of this, again, it's immutable. It cannot be changed. It cannot be defrauded. And this is extraordinary because outside of the NFT, in the analog world, art history is just riddled with stories of defrauding.
Mm-hmm.
The art fake. I mean, there are documentaries and movies made about art fake. It's like unbelievable, but nothing can be faked around this. Around the idea of the NFT, it cannot be faked. It's minted by the artist, and it's purchased by somebody, and then they retain the rights, and everything's documented. So it's extraordinary like that. Mm-hmm. But to your point, value is to a certain extent always determined by the beholder.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. But generally, what the beholder finds valuable is identifying the artist that made it, and there being some story behind it. Usually people aren't that interested in paintings that they don't know who painted them. Hey, back to the ledger of who's bought and sold the NFTs, just quickly. So there's a lot of anonymity, or there's a ledger of wallet addresses, but we don't know who owns or controls those wallets. Is that going to present issues, or not really?
It's not, because the market's in its infancy, and as it matures, again, you're going to see. And right now, I think that the larger art market, their larger art world, is much like the hedge funds were with crypto for the last 5 years, sitting on the sidelines, watching, waiting, and strategizing, the right time and the right way to bring, the traditional finance world into this radical experiment. What was a radical experiment is now being adopted. You can buy Tesla with Bitcoin. PayPal, is accepting cryptocurrencies as forms of payment. Most of the major hedge funds have gotten involved, at the very least, with Bitcoin. So that's where we are with the NFT market. I see us being probably, I think the growth rate is going to be exponential, relevant to what we already, we saw that, how many years was it? 2011 to 2020 was the sort of floodgates broke on adoption. Yeah, I think you're going to see an accelerated timeline for adoption with NFTs. I mean, right now, these platforms are all still being, I'm on, Uptick platform, and that's in testnet, Twinsy. A lot of these platforms that are going to be native coin driven, which is fantastic because it gets you away from the ether gas issue, but poses other problems because you have less universality in transferring your collectibles from wallet to wallet. You have to stay in the native coin wallets, but yeah, I think you're going to see adoption very quickly. To your question, that's the problem now, but it will all find its way toward, sense and sensibility. Like, it will come together. There, traditions will form, regulations to a certain extent will come in, but at the end of the day, the people that are participating in the NFT market that matter, the artists, the collectors, and the institutions that ultimately will come in, they're going to be above board. They're going to want to develop the provenance of the market. Provenance is going to drive the NFT market in the same way that it has driven the analog market. It just is going to come down the road. And right now, we are in that wild, wild west of where we were with crypto 5 years ago. And that'll probably take 2 or 3 years to really settle.
I see. I agree. I think it'll be get bigger and bigger. Like you were saying before, it cost you what, $25,000 to put that show on in Paris. And I
Mhm.
know a lot of artists, they got to rent the studio space, set everything up. And now if you can just pop a bunch of things on Uptick or one of these other platforms, it's, you know, you can do it from your bedroom. You don't have to spend all that money. And then so many more people can see it, right? It's like Amazon Marketplace, or there's an unlimited potential there for getting your work out. I had a
You know,
couple other questions, but yeah.
well, just to your point, to put it into perspective, I I really started dedicating myself to moving over my art career into the NFT, because I believe in it. I really believe in the space, and I think it's, you know, a perfect fit for myself. But in a short span of 5 weeks, you know, I have developed a serious following across multiple platforms, and have sold, or I don't know, maybe almost 100 works
Wow.
in
In 5 weeks.
five, you know, and think about what that, I mean, I should say, let me tell you what that means. You know, I probably sold 100 works through galleries over the last 20 years.
Hmm.
I've sold 100 works through NFT platforms in the last 5 weeks.
Yeah. It's
There's
revolutionary.
nothing like this. This is a precedent setting moment in history that is going to make it a viable career option for artists.
Yeah, totally.
Yep.
I got a couple, I think we're getting a little long on the time here, but a couple other things I want to ask you. I'll put it all together and see if we can get through it. One is the different platforms. You know, you mentioned Uptick, there's some others. I just kind of wanted to hear your take on, I don't know, what's good, what isn't good. You mentioned the gas fees is kind of
Yeah.
prohibitively expensive. And then also I wanted to get it all in at once here. Just talk about the different people making NFTs now. Like I guess there, I imagine there's some people, like some people using paint, and then they take a picture and then they create that into an NFT, or people are just making these crypto punk images, or your style is totally unique. Like I want to know kind of what you do and what the norm is. And then I think we'll just about be done with the interview.
Okay. Yeah. So for anyone that's hearing this and is teetering on getting into the NFT market as an artist or a collector. So right now, the front runners are going to be OpenSea and Rarible. These are on the Ethereum blockchain. They're driven by Ethereum for gas. They're the most functional, um, intelligent by design spaces to work right now. That's why they're leading the marketplace by membership. So if you set up your account, you're going to open your account and link it to your wallet, whether it's MetaMask or Trust. And that will open you immediately to being able to explore the marketplace on OpenSea or Rarible, and all of the platforms that are out now and all the platforms that will come out. Setting up an account for all of them just involves connecting your wallet. And then from there, you can, elaborate on your profile, upload identity pictures, etc. For the artist, the experience on OpenSea and Rarible is smooth. It's really flawless. I understand why the majority of serious artists, or, I want to say serious artists, but they're gravitating toward that because of its seamless, sort of perfect mechanical accessibility. And it's quick. It's very quick, but it's expensive, depending on, relative to how what you can afford to pay to mint your art pieces into NFT. Typically, depending on the time of day, the gas prices on Rarible or OpenSea are going to range between, say, $35 up to $150. Depends on how combustible I mean, how busy the Ether blockchain is.
Mm-hmm.
Then around those two, you have all of these native blockchains that are launching projects. Like I'm right now waiting to launch on Refinable, which is, that's launching on Binance Dex. I am already very active and have been for the last 5 weeks on Uptick project, which is on the Iris protocol off of Cosmos. And that's been extraordinary experience for me. So there, your gas is, again, it's a native blockchain. So there, the gas is paid and the work is bought with Iris. On Refinable, the native coin is going to be fine, and you're going to sell your work for fine, and you're going to use fine for your gas. So that's sort of the gist, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have native blockchains with native coins that are going to be less expensive for the artists to work on and the collectors to buy on. But the downside is, at least early on, eventually I think there's going to be some integration across all these platforms, and you're going to have aggregator sites that will launch, that will bring all of the different native blockchains and their collectibles, and everything will be in one place. That doesn't exist right now. So if you are selling your work or you're buying work on the native blockchains, that work can only be sold then again on that particular native blockchain, and it can only be held in wallets that are exclusive to those blockchains. So that's a downside right now. So the upside then to Rarible and the cost inefficiency is that within the Ethereum network, there are many different mint I can't think of it. Anyway, there's 5 or 6 different NFT marketplaces that all aggregate, and all you can then resell if you're a collector on any of these other Ethereum network sites. All of the Ethereum based wallets, you can transfer collectibles between, and so that's why they're leading the marketplace right now. And then the sort of next step up, which is where you get into where art institutions are already gravitating. You saw the Sotheby's auctioning off of a Beeple digital work for $69 million. That happened at a private sort of NFT auction place.
Mm-hmm.
In this realm, there's super rare, there's Foundation, Known Origin, I think, is going to sort of pedal in more elite sort of application only artists being represented. I'm in the process of applying to all of the upper echelon houses. Most of them are only taking on 4 or 5 artists a week right now. So there's a long, and you just kind of have to wait to be selected. So right now I'm actually, I think, hopefully I'm going to be selected to be one of the artists at the launch of Refinable, which is also going to have an application process to be getting on there, which is good. I like that. I like that better than, the OpenSea or the Rarible, where, it's sort of just a public marketplace and anybody can put anything they want up there. And yeah, there's 250,000 people on there every day, but it comes with its ups and downs.
Yeah.
So that, if that helps on the idea.
Totally.
Yeah.
All the different options. And what else? So the work that you do, and the whole gamut, if people are doing oil painting and then digitizing it, or is everyone just what are most people making and selling as NFTs? And then what are some of your techniques, and what are you doing?
Well, I mean, true to the sort of history of blockchain going back to the cypherpunks, and obviously Satoshi as this sort of cultural hero weighing on everybody's mind. There's a lot of pop art sensibility, popular culture right? That's what's sort of dominating the marketplace right now. You're seeing, you know, if you go back, remember CryptoKitties. I mean, that's where it's sort of like, you know, the real takeoff in the idea of collectibles on the blockchain started. But I don't really think, much like I said earlier, everything is developing now. Everything is in flux. Everything is going to move toward standardization, or compartmentalization, where, you know, you're going to find just hobbyists and, you know, people that are, you know, making the next knockoff, you know, hyper pixelated unicorn. That stuff's going to probably just end up staying in Rarible and OpenSea. I think long term, you're going to see these giant public marketplaces just being like, you know, going to the flea market. The artists that are trying to really contribute to the development as a fine art market are going to be gravitating toward markets that are coming and markets that have already exist, that focus on rarity, that ensure rarity, and that sort of vet the personas that are behind the works that are being minted and being auctioned off. That's going to will be an important part of the process. So it's hard to say categorically what is happening as far as what art is what art is coming, what art is here. You know, again, everybody's just playing with the technology right now. And that's mostly what you're seeing. I actually have a lot of really good friends who are exceptional artists in a lot of different realms, and most of them are not ready to come. They're like we started in this whole conversation, wrapping your head around the concept, having faith in it. I mean, I don't have any trouble with it, but a lot of artists do. But that's going to change, you know. A lot of it, people are waiting for the art institutions to come on board. The more they come on board, the more traditional artists are going to come on board. You're seeing some international superstars in the art world have stepped in. Bansky sold one of his recent works. He minted an NFT of it and then burned it, you know, as a public show of protest against the traditional art market, and him embracing the NFT as a valid place for artists like him, you know, who's now widely institutionalized. He's held in every museum in the world. Damien Hirst, a very, very prominent living artist out of England, is jumping into the NFT market. And I think you're just going to start to see one at a time. You know, it's interesting, Damien Hirst and Bansky, they're both kind of like, you know, far left thinking, you know, slightly radical minds. And you're seeing the risk takers taking the risk, right? So that's what we're seeing right now, is the risk takers are taking the risk, just like in the early days of crypto in general. And as we move forward, institutions will come in standardizing, you know, validating, and then you're going to see the floodgates open. With regard to my own work,
I was thinking just now, maybe like the layering that you do. If you could talk about that, what you try to achieve.
Sure. Well, so part of it is that I'm sitting on probably 5,000 works captured digitally on a large format camera, the Nikon 800, over the last, you know, dozen years. All of my art catalog is there in space, right? It's all that immaterial content is just sitting there. And, you know, I walked away from art when my brother passed away from a heroin addiction in 2018. I tore down my studio and turned it into a family room. And he was a big supporter of mine, and I didn't think I could ever do it again. You know, one of the reasons that I decided to come back into the arts was because of this notion that the immaterial does not have value. or couldn't possibly have the value like that, say the $69 million that Beeple sold his work for. But what is most valuable to just about everybody listening, I encourage you to think of this. What is most valuable in your life is immaterial. Consciousness is immaterial. Your love for your children, your love for your wife, your memories of your deceased loved ones, trust in your peers to do the right thing, trust in the driver coming down the road, faith in God. I mean, so much of our life is driven, emotively, psychologically and spiritually by the immaterial. And so for somebody to say there's no value in the immaterial, value is immaterial itself. The concept is in the abstract. Mm. So I had this thought about 2 months ago about the NFT. I was thinking about NFTs and about this idea of value in the immaterial. And I said, my God, my brother now is immaterial. Mm-hmm. I can't see my brother. I can't hug my brother, but his value has only increased by his death. And that profound thought, I thought, this marketplace is that real for me. There's no more value there's no less value for me in the NFT art that is original by its signature on the blockchain. It's no less valuable than buying a painting at a gallery. It's a one-of-one painting. If I'm putting up a one-of-one of a digital original, that is to me as valuable as a painting. And I think the market is going to agree with me over time. But go to your point about the work. So I have this whole body of work that I walked away from, and it's all stored digitally in master files. And I said, I'm going to utilize those strikingly original works because of the process that I invented and pushed into a genuine art form that was accepted, and shown in galleries all around the world. That is there's so much information in those files that's unique. So much, signatures of energy, textures, things that I discovered along the way as an analog artist. That's precious. I mean, it's just precious, beautiful detail that you can't find. I had to make it. Yeah. And it's made and it's sitting there, and I wanted to sort of honor all of that work by bringing it back into new digital creations, focusing on the themes that matter to me, which is, sort of separate from the aesthetics that we're talking about now. And I am able to do that, as all digital artists know, through Photoshop and layering. So I can bring in 1, 2, 10, 25 different works from my past to give them new life as I'm trying to make a new statement about something in our time and place on a daily basis. And I'm utilizing that old work like I would utilize the, burning of watercolor on a metal plate, or the acceleration of the oxidation, where I'm specifically want to use this work for a color palette, or I want to use this work for a textural palette, or I want to use this work because of its ambient light. And in this new work, as I'm developing them every day, it's amazing how in 5 weeks, I've sort of developed a whole process approach to giving life to new works, and then the subject matter is a whole other story. I mean, if I'm working, depending on what series we're in, it can be anywhere from meditative to philosophical to sort of like a hard knock, streetwise protest piece, or I really love Redux, where, you're bringing a focus back through art historical precedents and, reinterpreting them new pieces. And I have a series I call art historical ahistorical artifacts. The whole point of ahistorical is out, not of history or not stuck in history, right? Out of history.
Mm-hmm.
And artifacts, these are these sort of like relics that I'm bringing life to. And, so that's become a huge part of my process, that everything that you see that's new is all built out of the old, or where the old meets a new subject matter, or the old meets a new focal point.
Yeah, so interesting.
Yeah.
So interesting. Okay, I think for this interview, that's about all I've got. I hope we can do this regularly, weekly or twice a month or something. Before we end, are there any other topics or things you want to say about what you've got lined up, or something we missed?
You asked me the question about what is art.
Yeah.
And my favorite quote about what is art is, one of my favorite quotes is Alberto Giacometti. He said, "The object of art is not to reproduce reality, but to create a reality of the same intensity or more intense." And I love that because, reality is not immutable. You know what I mean? We're talking about blockchain. Reality, I would love for this to be a future topic, because actually maybe I won't. This is too much to say all at once here, but I'll just leave you with that. The object of art is not to reproduce reality, but to create a reality of the same intensity or greater. I'd like to pick up from there next time we talk.
Okay. And you think we can do this weekly or a couple times a month?
As often as I have time, brother.